After watching this video, you should be prepared to explain why the human tendency to daydream can be interrupted using a storytelling marketing approach, to list 3 key benefits of storytelling when it comes to consumer engagement, to realize that different consumers are looking for different relationships with your company, and to explain the difference between storytelling and story sharing. Let's begin. Lesson 1, why storytelling is essential in social marketing. When we think about the way that our company or our brand or our organization is represented to the world, it's easy for us to be focused in on things like quality and credibility and whether or not someone wants to buy from us. But it's also important to understand that for a lot of consumers, the very idea of who you are is also important. It's not always just enough for people to know the name of your company or product. They're interested in understanding what the story is behind your brand. And that might be something like how you came to be or why you exist or what your mission is, or it might be something about the personality and sort of the lifestyle that's represented by your individual company. Now, the storytelling movement has been an area that we've really seen a lot of growth and a lot of improvement in the last several years in social media, with more and more brands moving towards this idea of sort of humanizing their companies by telling the stories that come out of the company itself, out of the use of the product, or even out of the consumer stories that, share how products benefit their lives, or again, just what goes on in that interaction and that dynamic between the organization and between the customer side of things. Now, when it comes to storytelling, there's several different ways in which this approach offers value to a business. And one of the key ones is on the emotional side. We've talked a lot in the social sharing dynamic, in some of the other areas of, the spread and the viral concept about how emotion is one of the most powerful things that impacts people's decision making and engagement with the brand. So when it comes to creating that emotional connection or leaving people with some type of emotional response, storytelling is one of the most powerful ways to impact that. It gives you an opportunity to sway the emotion of consumers in terms of how they look at or view or are receptive to your brand. Now, another thing that storytelling can really do that adds a lot of value is the idea of making you credible. Because a lot of times the way we tell stories, especially when we're incorporating in true to life examples or, consumer stories, there's an implied credibility that comes through that storytelling and comes through those third-party experiences that can help people feel more secure about doing business with you. Not just more emotionally positive, but actually feel that security of trusting that what they think they're going to get or what they're hoping to get, that there's going to be enough follow through and enough other people have had a positive experience for them to really trust that that's what's going to happen. Now, another area that storytelling brings a lot of value into a company is in the idea of making you memorable, because human beings are wired for stories. We are much more capable of recalling broad ideas and concepts and emotions when they're communicated via a story. So if we give someone a list of facts, a list of selling points, a list of reasons why to do business with you, the ones that touch them emotionally or that, problem solve, those tend to stick with them, but a lot of the data gets lost. But when we put it in the format of a story and someone is sharing what their experience was, our brains literally archive it and categorize it differently, and our recall level goes up. So again, along with building trust and along with creating that emotional impact, the fact that people are better able to recall the information that's communicated to them via that story helps make it a very powerful marketing tool. Now, in addition to that, it's important to keep in mind that on average, people tend to be daydreamers. In fact, study after study shows that if our minds aren't occupied with an important task, if we're not truly focused on something, we tend to drift off. And when we look at that concept of daydreaming, the average human spends literally half of their waking hours daydreaming. We average 2,000 waking drifts per day with an average length of about 14 seconds. So you do the math on that 2,000 times 14 seconds, that's a pretty good portion of our day where our brain is drifting off. But when they look at the brain's ability to stay focused versus having those drifts, we stay focused during a story. If we're reading a book, if we're watching a movie, if someone is telling us an engaging story, we are better equipped and better able to put those drifts off and really stay focused on what's happening. So that's one of the other sort of scientific and concrete reasons why that memorable factor comes into play when we present things via stories. Now, stories also allow us to connect in one of the easiest ways possible, again, because our brain is going to be a little more focused on being able to receive that message. So by using stories to spread your brand message, or to explain your offerings, or to demonstrate how they work, you increase the chance of keeping your audience focused on you and giving them enough recall that they can come back at a later point to actually do some business with you. Now, think of storytelling from sort of the mindset of how we meet and engage with other people. So, in general, when we're meeting up with a prospective friend or a job prospect, maybe we're coming for an interview, a service workers, even just a stranger on the street, any conversation that goes past just hello, how are you doing, and the cursory, kind of polite responses, it tends to be a story. This is what we do when we meet. We're naturally wired to seek out insight and common ground and information about who another person is. And in those interpersonal relationships, the types of questions we ask, the words we use, they're indicative of the type of relationship we want to build. So clearly, if you're single and you see someone else that, you hope might be single, that might be one of the early questions you ask. And then based on whether, there's a romantic interest there, you're probably going to ask different questions than if it's a interview prospect for a job, or if you're meeting up with a, coworker for the first time. The relationship that we're looking for denotes the type of information we want. And that's one of the important things for us to keep in mind when it comes to storytelling, is we also have the ability to tailor our story to the audience. So we can put those different features up front. We can weave them in a different way if we're appealing to a group of 60-something females that love to sew versus a group of 20-something millennials that love whiskey tasting. It's a different message that gets put together with different focuses and features. There's also different things that we're going to put forward if we're proposing, $1 million contract versus a $25 impulse buy that someone can, click and order online and have delivered the next day. Now, on the business side of this, we need to think about what the story that we need is, because a lot of times we get so focused in business on getting the conversion that we forget that sometimes part of getting that conversion is creating those emotions, building that credibility and trust, helping them have exposure to what's possible. And for a long time, this has been done through education. We might put up videos or articles that aim to educate and to demonstrate. The story side of it brings that more social interaction and environment into the mix, and that's something important for us to keep in mind. So a quote that I really love about this concept that sort of lays the foundation of why it's so important comes from the Chief Content Officer over at Digitas. And he says, the challenge is clear by now. Intrusive, interruptive, self-centered marketing no longer works the way it once did, and its effectiveness will only continue to diminish in the social age. Because again, the way that we share information back and forth with each other and the ways that messages spread, it happens differently in the social media age than it did before, when it was more advertising focused and where marketing really was more about, pushing the advertise, pushing the message, and sort of the Don Draper style of, if you don't like the conversation, change the conversation and tell people what you want them to hear. Because so much marketing is now driven by consumers through that conversation, we need to be able to approach it in a different way. Now, another side of that is the idea there's a difference between storytelling and story sharing. And some of it boils down to semantics, but some of it also does need to be kind of taken into account when we look at how we might put our message together. Because semantically, consider the difference between telling and sharing. So to tell is to communicate information, facts, or news to someone in spoken or written word. It's to order, instruct, or advise someone to do something. That second part that I want you to keep in mind. But to share is to give a portion of something to another, to tell someone about something, especially something personal. It's a slight semantic difference, but it's a huge difference in terms of our approach. And I love this Seth Godin quote that really pairs up with that idea. The best part of show and tell has never been the telling part. It's been the showing, letting someone see and experience and inviting them into that shared experience. And that's one of those things that makes the social version of storytelling really more like story sharing, especially if you want to do it in a way that creates that back and forth consumer engagement. Storytelling in its traditional sense is more the stories that we've put into commercials and advertising. And there's a place for that. There's a place to put that together in the social realm, and it's very important. But the other area that we're just starting to kind of merge into and that really needs some exploration by brands is that idea of the social sharing, where it really is about engaging back and forth with your audience and inviting them to be part of an experience with you and with your brand. So ask yourself, do you want to tell your story to people, or do you want to share it with them and let them share their story with you? And how do you meld those two together, and what does that look like within your particular company or among your target audience? So now that we've laid the foundation of why storytelling is so important and sort of what type of impact it can have, the next thing we need to do is look at the business side of telling your story. What does it look like to create a narrative or something that's representative of either your business's story or sort of the lifestyle or concept or ideas that you want to promote to people? Now, there's tons of questions you could ask yourself to start building your story. But we can focus in on a couple key areas as a starting point to build from. One of the first ones is the idea of whether or not you have a founder's story. Now, for a lot of brands, the story of their founder is so interesting or inspiring that it catches the eye and it makes people take a second look at the product. So think of the companies that are sort of iconic in terms of who their founder or their leader is. So whether that was Steve Jobs and the role he played at Apple, or Walt Disney and the inspiration and the role he brought to, the entire Disney complex, or loads and loads of other businesses, there are lots of examples out there of how the brand itself was so tied to the person who was sort of leading the helm that became part of their story and people were really interested in it. Now, we can find loads of examples of different brands where the founder really plays a critical role in representing who they are. Now, a great example of this is Spanx. The founder, Sarah Blakely, has really embraced the story, both of how she came up with the idea, which was basically she was trying to fit into a pair of cream pants for a party, and they didn't fit quite right. And she knew that when she put her pantyhose on, everything seemed to lay nicer. So she literally cut the feet out of a pair of pantyhose and put them on, and that's what launched the brand. She loves to sort of tell that story, but she also loves to tell the story, from her tagline of putting her own butt on the line pays off, because the way that she made her first sale to Neiman Marcus is that she literally dragged the buyer into a dressing room, and she went in and she put on a pair of white pants and came out and said, here's what I look like without them, and went back in and put her pair of Spanx on under the white pants and came back out and said, now here's what happens when I'm wearing these. And the buyer from Neiman Marcus ended up placing a huge order, and it was the first major sale that she got that put her in place somewhere. So those stories and sort of this is how it happened, this is literally what a difference it makes, that becomes part of the brand. And sort of Sarah Blakely's journey as an entrepreneur and, moving her way up into the Forbes list of, highest earning females in the United States, all of that plays a huge role in how they promote the brand itself and in sort of the storyline and the lifestyle line that they want to promote to the people that might buy the product. Now, on a completely differently themed vein, we have fast food chain Wendy's in the US and Canada, where Dave Thomas was the founder. And even though he passed away several years ago, he's still a critical part of the brand and of the story. Because basically it was the idea that a working class guy makes good and continues to act like a working class guy while building a massive charity. Because it wasn't uncommon, even when he was CEO, to see him show up in a store somewhere and start working behind the counter or sweeping the floors somewhere. He always played that role that made it clear to his employees that he wasn't above them, that he was one of them and part of them. And has a huge, huge ongoing charity effort for adoption because he was adopted as a child. And so all of that plays into the narrative of Wendy's and who they are and what their brand message is and the lifestyle that they want to promote to customers. In fact, if you if you go there now and you buy a meal and you get your cup, all of the cups have stories of kids when they were finally adopted and what it meant to them when they were adopted, or, what their first experience was having a new family. So again, that plays into the story just because people are interested in the start of where or how it came to be. So looking at, what the stories are from within your team, and it doesn't always have to be that founder story. Sometimes it's just someone who works there. Post Serial paired up with Burns Group and used real factory workers to create a round of Honey Bunches of Oats commercials. And let's take a quick look at what one of those actually look like so you can kind of see the storytelling in action here.
I get out of work and I go to the store and somebody be smelling around. I smell cookies. I said, oh no, you just smell me. I just got out of work. That's Honey Bunches of Oats. That's all. I said, don't eat me now.
Now they're short, simple, easy stories. There's nothing complex to them. They more just make you smile and laugh, but they're the types of stories that come from listening to the people who work at your company, from thinking about how your company and their experience impacts the world around them. Now, another question that we can look at is, does your company or group solve a problem? Now, this isn't about the reasons you think you're great or the reasons you think people should buy from you. It's about that unique way that you solve an issue that consumers, or on the B2B side of things, that the buying agent is looking at, that they're trying to fix. Now, a great example of this is Airbnb, or you could look at Uber or Lyft on a similar vein, allowing people to experience travel in a new and affordable way, but also letting, owners or drivers earn extra money, from something that might have been sitting there empty anyways. That idea that when you're traveling, you don't have to stay in a bland, expensive hotel. In fact, when I travel for business, pretty much any place I go, I always book via Airbnb because, if I can have a bedroom and a living room and a kitchen, especially if we're traveling as a family, and there can be, separate bedrooms as opposed to having my kids all stay in the same room with my husband and I, it just makes sense. But there's also the story side of that, of its different experiences. And that's one of the big things that people talk about, is how the experience changes. And even on the side of trying to recruit people to put their properties, it becomes about the freedom and the lifestyle that's enabled. And there's tons of examples on YouTube of people sharing how, leasing out that, their vacation property the rest of the year when they're not there, pays for the vacation property and more. Or, the people who now travel full time because they're able to lease out, their apartment or their home or something else on Airbnb. The story side comes from the problems that are solved for people. Now, another great example of a company that focuses on their story from that side is Dollar Shave Club. They basically took a problem everyone complains about and they made it go away. The idea that razors cost a ridiculous amount of money, that you always forget to buy new ones until it's too late, so you're shaving with a dull blazer, and it's just inconvenient. So all of their messaging focuses in on that idea of, we make it cheap, we make it easy, and it shows up right at your house and you don't ever have to think about it anymore. And their commercials all tell the same story with kind of a, funny, modern, millennial-focused way. So let's take a look at one of those as an example.
As a founder of my own club, I'd love to know, how does yours work?
Dollar Shave Club presents What the Fact.
It's simple. You choose from one of our 3 great razors. We'll give you a free reusable handle, and each month, we'll send you replacement cartridges for just a few bucks. That means you get to shave with a fresh blade anytime you want, which feels amazing.
Will I be locked into a contract?
No, we wouldn't lock you into anything.
That's a relief. How long for delivery? I've got a conjugal visit next week.
Well, what if I don't have to shave that often?
No problem. After you sign up, you can choose to get replacement cartridges every other month.
You sound like my mom. I like that.
Ew.
What's this I hear about Dollar Shave Club selling more than just razors?
You heard right. We make all our own high-quality grooming products like Dr. Cover Shave Butter, Boogie's Hair Gel, and Big Cloud Daily Face Moisturizer with Sunscreen.
Now you know what the fact is up with Dollar Shave Club. So join the club today.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simplilearn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.